In this golden age of video games, players are somewhat spoiled by the quality modern voiceovers. From industry legends like Nolan North to well-known celebrities lending their voices, characters feel more real than ever before. It wasn't long ago that voiceovers in games were considered afterthoughts rather than a shining achievement of storytelling. Cringe warning ahead. Let's dive into the worst voiceover performances video games have to offer. Before we begin, remember to hit that subscribe button to level up and join our notification squad. GOLDMAN, House of the Dead 2. This series has been a staple of the on-rail shooter genre since it began. While the first game didn't win any awards or praise for its voice acting, the campy and silliness was maxed out to 11 in the sequel. No character sells the schlock with more monotoned aggression than Caleb Goldman. As the main antagonist, Goldman gives us all the nonsensical yells and awkward lines we crave. Then, he tops it off with possibly the greatest death of any character ever. What puts him over the top is his robotic, text bot-like delivery of every line. Who can forget such classics as
"At last you've come. Friends, the door of fate shall open,
and
our emperor shall awaken soon. Hurry, friends."
Almost no budget went into the American dubbing of the game, and so the developers had no time or money to ensure any quality went into the voices. Did they just offer the job to a random guy on the street? Maybe, but that's what gives these games their charm. Without Goldman's fantastically bad performance or the incredibly cheesy writing, the game would feel like just another average shoot. Wouldn't any game be 1,000 times better if Goldman was the villain? KAZAMA, Last Alert. Known as Red Alert in Japan, Last Alert is the grandpa of terrible video game voice acting. It was developed during the primitive years of CD-based gaming and capitalized on the ability to include voiceover in cutscenes. When the game was localized to North America, they used unprofessional actors and tried to rush the game out as soon as possible. Bad idea. The cast was super small, and the attempts to disguise their voices when playing multiple roles is just one of the many problems. The game follows Guy KAZAMA, cookie-cutter action hero whose dialogue boils down to several confusing and terribly cheesy one-liners. Usually, Guy says them right before he faces a level boss. The most famous of these lines is when he faces Chairman Steve near the end of the game. He says,
"People will hate you, Steve, if you're too stingy."
Did that make any sense to you? Our guess is no, and that's because the actor meant to say stingy, not sting-y. This clip is a perfect example of a rushed team that was forced to work with unprofessional actors with no time for redos. Looks like the developers were a little stingy on the budget. Dory Gordy, Shenmue 2. At the time of release, Shenmue 1 and 2 became the most expensive games ever produced, costing roughly $60 million combined. They were the passion project of director Yu Suzuki. Suzuki made sure the budget went to important things like the game engine, graphics design, karaoke, and sports cars. Then, when the money was all gone, he realized that they never recorded the English dialogue. So the team found $100 lying around and used it to find actors for the game. That is honestly the only way a game with that large a production could have such bad performances. Now, we could talk for days about the stale and robotic talent of the main character Ryo, but the game is known for its many over-the-top side characters, so he went with the ever-so-talented dancer Dory Gordy. What makes him so great is the absolute shock value of his voice. Ryo first meets Dory when he challenges him to an arm wrestling match. At first glance, he is tall and super buff. Then he opens his mouth and he sounds like Terry Crews on helium.
"That's the way. Tell me your name, little boy."
His constant voice cracks and high-pitched shrieks make it impossible to beat him in a match because you're laughing so much. Can we request Shenmue 3 starring Dory Gordy? Gun HQ, Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic's first venture into the 7th generation of consoles is infamous for, well, just being bad. It failed on many levels and in some cases was just downright broken. So it's understandable that we would find some classic voiceover mess-ups all throughout it. The series has had issues with its voiceover talent since the Sonic Underground days. Whether it was Tails' voice sounding like nails on a chalkboard or lines of dialogue interrupting each other, there was always something off about the audio. But with Sonic 06, the issues went into unprofessional territory. During a shadow mission, around the middle of the game, the player gets a message from Gun HQ. The message includes two versions of the same line. The first is obviously a failed attempt, followed immediately by the full line.
Agent Shadow, E123 Omega has engaged methods. Head to the Wave Ocean, head to Wave Ocean. Agent Shadow, E123 Omega has engaged methods. Head to Wave Ocean immediately.
How in the world did they let that in? It's not like it was a throwaway line from a random NPC or exposition for a side quest. This was the beginning of a main mission in the game. The slip-up was probably due to a rushed development cycle and lack of quality control. Sega definitely let us down this time. Dr. Light, Mega Man 8. Capcom has seemingly given up on the Mega Man franchise in recent years with several canceled games and lackluster releases. The downhill trend began with his 1996 train wreck. Like Sonic 06, the game was rushed in all departments. The gameplay was sluggish and the design was bland. But nothing could compare to the horrid voice acting, especially from Dr. Light. The slurred speech, the uncut line screw-ups, and the unforgettable mispronunciations all added up to an unintentionally hysterical performance. He can't even say the villain name right. For some reason, he calls Dr. Wily Dr. Wowie.
Cover all the energy immediately, Mega Man.
But where is Dr. Wily?
That's a good question. We may be able to locate another energy emission from the radar room. When we find that meteor, we'll find Dr. Wily.
Can you believe that? The main reason for the confusing inflections and pronunciation is simple. Every other Mega Man game has had the voices recorded in Canada, but for the 8th game, Capcom chose to record in Japan with English-speaking actors living there. Weird, right? Thus, the actors were reading westernized dialogue with Eastern inflections, a running theme through many of the games of this list. Still, this doesn't excuse the actor mistaking an I for an ah or li for we. At least he makes a somewhat dull game infinitely more enjoyable every time he's on screen. DUBOIS, Deep Fear. In response to the outstanding success of Resident Evil, Sega released Deep Fear, a claustrophobic survival horror game for the Dreamcast. Overall, the game was well received. The sound and level design are actually pretty effective. Even most of the cast turns out passable performances, especially when compared to most games at the time. But there's a big purple-colored elephant in the room, and his name is DUBOIS. There is no real way to explain this one, you just need to hear it first.
I asked DUBOIS, the designer, to come too.
Oh, there's no problem with my CFOX system. No accident should have occurred. Oh!
He sounds like the voice a brother would use to mock his older sister. Based on the name, it's plausible that the character is meant to be French, but then why the high-pitched voice? Or the slight British accent? None of this is explained, nor do any of the other characters react to it. Maybe they couldn't find a female actor in time to record. Who knows? What we do know is his voice is a tasteless joke that developers felt was funny at the time and clearly hasn't aged well. Some believe DUBOIS is one of the first homosexual characters in gaming, although it's quite a crude representation of the gay community. BRISCO, Michigan, Report from Hell. The next selection is a bit more obscure, but it definitely deserves a spot on this list. Here's a game that, on the surface, feels like your run-of-the-mill survival horror game. It follows a cameraman, soundman, and reporter who encounter horrific creatures that plague the streets of Chicago. Yep, a game that's called Michigan takes place in Chicago. Already, this isn't looking too good. To be fair, the graphics are decent, and the gimmick of guiding characters with a camera is very unique, but then they start talking, and everything becomes unbearably funny. The worst offered is the sound man named BRISCO. During each level, the player and BRISCO follow one of 6 reporters who investigate the strange happenings in Chicago. If the reporter dies, then the level immediately ends and the next level begins with a new reporter. Before this, however, BRISCO will always shout out the reporter's name 3 times and finish with a cringe-worthy cry of, "Oh my god!"
Carly! Oh my God! And oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God!
Each time is funnier than the last as actor screams and cries his way through the lines. The game never made it to North American shelves, and we can't help but believe that BRISCO was a major reason. Link, Faces of Evil. From the decades of consistently great Zelda games, it's shocking to learn Nintendo would ever let a game like this be released. Link, Faces of Evil was made for the long-forgotten Philips CDI console. It was produced through a licensing deal between Nintendo and Philips and was actually one of 3 Zelda games for the console. Nintendo had almost no input or control over those games. As a result, they suffered dramatically in gameplay, story, and design. The most notable thing about them was the choice to add a voice cast, a first for the series. Although in hindsight, Nintendo might not have used voiceovers in a Zelda game for a reason. By giving Link a voice, this iconic young hero quickly turns into a whiny and dorky kid. He's first introduced by asking Zelda for a good luck kiss before leaving for his adventure.
How about a kiss for luck?
You've got to be kidding.
Totally out of character. Then he spends the rest of the game oohing and awing with a voice that is more annoying than Navi. For the first time, we may actually side with Ganon, if it means we never have to hear that darn voice again. Link has always worked best as the silent hero, and we hope they keep him that way. Ethan, Heavy Rain. David Cage has been praised and criticized his entire career for his AAA games feeling more like interactive movies. Games like Beyond Two Souls have used advanced performance capture and professional actors to create realistic characters. Whichever side you're on, it's undeniable that a lot of talent and skill go into every performance, except maybe one. That unloved stepchild is the one and only Ethan from Heavy Rain. The game is agreed by many to be Cage's best work so far. It's known for its complex storytelling and dark taboo subject matter. Yet all of that greatness is almost upended by a laughable performance from the main protagonist. Really, this one comes down to two specific moments near the beginning of the game that completely destroy the tone. First is when Ethan searches for his son Jason, who wandered off in a mall. The scene is meant to feel intense as the music ramps up and Jason moves farther out of sight, but it's ruined by Ethan's constant yelling of "Jason! Jason! Jason! Jason!" What's worse, later his other son, Sean, goes missing and similar scene is set up. Yet again, the intense mood is trashed by moans of "Sean! Sean! Sean! Sean!" This one has been talked to death already, and we feel it's pretty self-explanatory. Barry, Resident Evil. Could it be any other? Despite being one of the most influential games in the horror genre, Resident Evil is arguably more famous for its amazingly bad voice acting. With so many great voices, it was very difficult to pick just one. But we feel Barry's performance is the perfect balance of cringe and humor that goes unmatched. From Jill sandwiches to the Master of Unlocking, his memorable lines are paired with a gravelly, slow-talking voice. At times, it almost sounds like he's been slipping a few cold ones between levels.
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
It's a weapon. It's really powerful, especially against living things.
Barry was played by the one and only Gregory. That's it. He's only credited with his first name and hasn't officially acted since. Could he have been a developer filling in to help finish the game? During a panel for the remastered game, the new cast commented on why the acting was so bad. DC Douglas said it sounded terrible because there was probably about 300 words on an Excel sheet. The voice actors have no idea what the context of the scene is, so they just read the line. They spoke further about how the Japanese developers choose takes that sounded good to them but might not work for a Western audience. Maybe these performances could have been stronger with a better director at the helm. Do you think you could do these voices better? Which was the best and which was the worst? Please let us know in the comments below. Be sure to like this video and share it with a friend. Then check out our playlist for more awesome videos and definitely subscribe to keep up to date with the gamer. Thanks for watching.